From KCRW Santa Monica, I'm Michael Silverblatt, and this is Bookworm. Today I'm honored to have as my guest Joan Didion. We are going to talk about her book, The Year of Magical Thinking. Of course, a terribly sad event was the provocation of the book, and her life has been dealing with other sad events about which I don't know how to speak, and will speak about the book itself. Now, you speak about, as a writer, that knowing what people would do is like breathing to you, and also that you've gone to a file called The Effect of the Change that you started to write, I guess, only days after John Gregory Dunn had died.
Right, it was called Notes on Change.
Yes.
Well, I wasn't thinking about keeping a file. I was just making a note. It's like a reflex for a writer to write things down because that's how you understand them. And this was something that had happened that I didn't understand at all.
It becomes the refrain in this book. You look at it again in May, and then I guess in October when you start to write the book. And the book, in a sense, becomes organized around that refrain.
Right. And the refrain was, let me find it. Life changes fast. Life changes in the instant. You sit down to dinner and life as you know it ends. The question of self-pity. The whole book became an exploration of those disjointed words. There was a point at which, I didn't set out to write a book. In October, I had sort of tentatively gone back to work. I had done just the chronology was John died on December 30th, 2003. And Quintana, our daughter, was in the hospital, and she was in the hospital off and on until mid-July. And so once she was out of the hospital, I did a piece that I'd promised to do for the New York Review on the campaign. And then I sat down to just collect my notes from this kind of disastrous series of events that was pretty much filling my mind. It was certainly front and center. And when I started doing the notes, I realized after about 3 days that I was thinking about how to organize how to organize them, which wasn't my intention. My intention had been not to just to type the notes for whatever reason. But if you're thinking how to organize them, you're thinking about writing a book. And it seemed to me that the only possible way to organize them was to keep repeating the same scenes. It was a way of replicating the exact experience. The experience of when something like this happens, you just keep obsessing on it. You see the same scene running over and over and over again, and sometimes it has new details, sometimes it has fewer details. So that was the general idea. So yeah, everything repeated itself.
Now you talk about the famous sentence in your first article for Life magazine that announced that you were in Hawaii in lieu of filing for divorce. Mm-hmm. A kind of sentence that shook everyone who read it, and I think shakes them still. You knew then that you would be living a life in public as a writer. That has been part of your subject.
Right.
And I wondered whether that has had a cost.
Well, I think any life led in public has a cost. It costs you something. On the other hand, it's certainly part of being a writer. Because you're living a life in public whether or not you're ever seen in public. Your innermost thoughts are in public. They're out there. So that's what makes writing a kind of breathtakingly daring act for somebody who's essentially shy, which I was as a child.
It seems astonishing to me, but did you feel then, in a sense, that to write about this book, if you wrote at all, would be obligatory?
It was obligatory. It was obligatory on for a whole series of reasons. One was it was the only way I was going to understand it and come to terms with what had happened. Because that's just the way I work. I mean, that's the way my mind works. I don't actually register anything or think about it until I've written it down. The other thing was, it was obligatory to, since this was the thing that was on my mind, what was I going to do? It would be dishonest to sit down and write something else. At the time that John died, I had a contract to do a book about the Kobe Bryant case. Well, I wasn't going to go back to the Kobe Bryant case. That wasn't on my mind at all. I mean, that would have been, at that point in my life, it would have been a very destructively dishonest thing to do, because it would have been just shutting out the reality of what had happened and not putting it out there. I mean, there's a sense in which any kind of writing, any kind of writer, like any kind of actor, it's about putting it out there on the line for the audience. It's a performance, and so you have to do that.
The show must go on.
It's like an aerialist. If you don't do it, you're going to get scared and never do it again.
Wow. I wondered to what extent you were aware. I'm sure that you were using, to write this book, every bit of craft at your disposal, because it's what, like an aerialist, you had to rely on. But it struck me while reading it that it was bringing aspects of your writing together, perhaps for the first time, that there's the Joan Didion who, in The Last Thing He Wanted, is reconstructing an event moment by moment in order to solve, to some extent, a criminal story, to figure out what happened during a vacant 3 minutes of time, very brief. And then there's the vortex kind of time that had appeared in Play It As It Lays and other books, time that ripples outward from a central moment so that you can barely see what you're trying to think about because of the string of associations. And seeing that specificity played against that rippling effect seemed truly astonishing to me.
I didn't even think I was writing this book. It was like, because my intention was just to make it artless. I didn't want that style. I didn't want it to get in. I didn't want it to get in the way of the directness of it. So I thought I wasn't writing it. And then I realized an excerpt of it was going to be published in a magazine, and the magazine, in the normal course of things, copy edited it. And then when I saw the copy edit, I realized, and I had to naturally take the copy editing out and restore it to the way I had written it. But it was the first time I realized that, in fact, I had written the book. That there was quite a lot of craft in it, although I hadn't planned it. I mean, the craft was devoted. I guess you can devote craft just as arduously to making something look artless as you can, to making it look crafted.